Hello, so I'm reviewing Albino Farm here. This is a 2009 slasher film directed by Joe Anderson. It possibly might be a co-directed thing with a guy called Sean McEwen. I'm not completely sure about that. Sean McEwen's certainly got a writing credit, possibly a co-directing credit as well. This is a Region 1 version, I think, that you see here, this particular version, but it also might be available in a different format with slightly different artwork. I'm not completely sure about that. This here is the Region 1 version, I think. That's the back of the sleeve of the cover art and the spine. One thing to note straight away is that you might notice I don't know if you can actually pick out the text here, but there's a name there, Chris Jericho, and that might be him there. So if you're a wrestling fan, there might be a familiar face in it here for you in Chris Jericho. He doesn't play a huge role, but it's certainly more than a cameo, so he's got a decent sized role within this film, so might be a reason to check this one out if you happen to be a wrestling fan. But anyway, like I said, 2009 film. And to go into the story of this one briefly, it's about 4 students who are journeying through the Ozark Mountains. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're journeying through this region, gathering material for a college project on local traditions, legends and historical places of interest. And along the way they puncture a tyre, so they've run into a bit of an accident with their car and they have to seek refuge in the nearest town, which turns out to be a really kind of weird, creepy religious community of people that are not very welcoming. And whilst they're in this town looking for help, they hear rumours of this local legend called the Albino Farm that sounds like it could be something that they could possibly shoot footage for their project. So they try to find it, but the village people are kind of close, are very tight-lipped and don't really want to disclose exactly where it is within the township, but they eventually find out and they stumble across this farm. But when they get there, they find that it's home to some horrors that they couldn't have anticipated. It's shall we say, it's certainly they're in for a bit of a rude awakening once they get there and find out exactly who the inhabitants of this farm truly are. So that's the story of it. Going to go into what I like now, the good points, and it takes inspiration from popular films like the Wrong Turn franchise, and the inhabitants of the farm turn out to be horribly deformed, inbred style people, kind of almost resembling monsters. It is definitely a slasher film, not a monster film, but they do look quite monsterish. But the special effects and the makeup work that is used to create these kind of misshapen men and women is very good. It's impressive for the most part. They look scary, they look very convincing, and there's some creative minds behind it as well, and that the effects and the look of the people is very good. They've really done a fine job in coming up with different kind of looks to these creatures, these people. And no two really look the same, they're all different, so they do a fine job there in terms of the makeup and the special effects surrounding these people that reside within the farm. And the next good point that I'm going to mention, this is kind of an expansion of the previous point, but I also liked how that everyone in the town itself, not the farm but just the actual more normal part of the town, also had a deformity or some sort of weird aspect to them to a lesser extent. Obviously it's not the same as those that actually live within the farm who are truly horribly deformed, but they've got the townspeople themselves have more minor things wrong with them, like it could be like a hunchback, that kind of thing. And these kind of weird and wonderful cast of characters that are made up by these deformed people that just reside within the town itself help to build a very surreal and creepy atmosphere just surrounding the town, let alone the actual farm of the title. So even the village, the township, is really creepy as well, and it's helped along by these minor deformities that the townspeople have. I also like the religious angle that was kind of brought in with these characters in the town as well, which added kind of an extra layer to things. Made them seem more fanatical, more unusual, kind of a bit more weird, and it helped create a certain special atmosphere that would have been lacking otherwise had they not have included that aspect of things. I really like the church scene, by the way, that played into this religious angle. That was really good and put a highlight of the film for me. So they did a good job there as well. And the last good point that I've got is that the 4 students that are the key characters that we're following through this story are well done for the most part. They're nicely balanced out with 2 sort of more studious, nice ones that are more concerned about just getting the project done. And you've got 2 more the other two are more rebellious. They're kind of the like slackers of the group that kind of lead the others into trouble, and they're the two that are ultimately responsible for wanting to go to this farm, and that lead the group as a whole into turmoil. So it's nicely balanced out. But the two nice ones, the final girl and her companion, I believe is actually an Indian guy called Sanjay, which is unusual in itself, as slasher films aren't known to be the most ethnically diverse. And he's actually a really good character, this Sanjay. He's actually a very, very good character. And he plays a really key role. I think the only other slasher film that I can think of outside of films obviously from the Bollywood area, from India and Pakistan, that kind of thing, that are like straight films from that part of the world. The only other one I can think of that contains a sort of high-profile Indian character is Return of the Family Man. Off the top of my head, maybe there are some more, but they're certainly a few and far between. So it was refreshing just to see this Indian character in such a high-profile position. He's really likeable too, so that was nice. But on the flip side of that is that it's always fun to sort of see the more mean characters, the more obnoxious characters get their comeuppance, and that's certainly the case here with the two not so nice characters. So it's fun in that sense. So there's a good blend of characters. So that's what I liked. So going on to the bad points now, the things that I didn't like so much, and it's a really big one that really lets the film down, unfortunately, is that it's really horrendously dark in places. It's probably the worst film that I've ever seen for lighting that I've ever come across. I mentioned in a recent review for The Night Devours the Day that was really bad for lighting, but this one's probably even worse towards the end. I noticed that the quality of the lighting seemed to drop off after just a few minutes into the running time. Once they got the puncture, it seemed like the lighting dropped off a little bit, but during the sort of first half of the film, it wasn't a big problem because it was during the daytime, so you could still see what was going on. The colours weren't that crisp, but you could kind of still make everything out just fine. But once darkness fell, it became a lot worse, and once they actually reached the titular farm of the title, is when it really went to hell, and it went to hell in a handbasket. Basically, the lighting was just atrocious throughout these final stages. It was so bad you could barely make out what was going on, which is a shame because from what we could see of the farm, it looked pretty cool. There was like a tree with bones on it. There was a cave system towards the end, and it did look good from the little that I could see, but they couldn't really excel to their full potential because it was so dark you could barely make out what you were seeing. And it really let the film down. I can't stress how bad it was. It was really to the point when it was at the film's major detriment. It really hurt it. So you could, to the point, like I say, you could barely make out what was happening, and you couldn't really follow it very well, follow what was going on. So it really lets the film down. Unfortunately, it's a major bad point. And the other thing, this is not as big of a problem, but the other bad point that I've got is that with there only being sort of 4 kids in the main group, there's not really that many victims to make up the body count as things progress. So it could definitely felt like it could have done with a couple of more kills, maybe. So maybe they could have upped the numbers in the group to say 6, or maybe had some other expendable characters come into it just to up the body count. But as it was a little bit light when it came to the kills. That's pretty much all I've got to say about it in the bad point. It's just that major one of the lighting really does hurt it. So that is a really big thing, unfortunately, that really does almost sink the whole project, really. But to go on to my verdict then, to put that aside just for a moment and give it my score out of 10, I'm going to have to go with a 5, which is a lot lower than I initially thought. It was going to be maybe like a 7 or even an 8 if I was being generous, but the lighting thing is such a big problem and it brings the whole thing down to a 5, so only half marks. It's a little bit harsh, but you have to kind of see this lighting thing to understand where I'm coming from. It really is bad, unfortunately, but there are some good points. Like I say, the 4 main characters are fun to watch. There's some nice ones, there's some obnoxious ones, so a good blend. Very impressive makeup work on the creatures, both in the village and in the farm itself. Really creepy atmosphere with the religious community as well. So it does excel in some areas, but Chris Jericho's thrown into boot, so if you're a wrestling fan, you've got that to enjoy. So there's a lot of good points, but unfortunately it's all kind of brought down by the bad lighting. I'll put a kill count, body count, by the way, in the description, so feel free to check that out. One more thing to mention before I finish is just going to look at some of the extras on this. It was about a year or so back that I watched this now, so I can't recall exactly how good the extras were, but I think they were pretty short and sweet and to the point. Sometimes when you watch the extras on films, they kind of ramble on too much, and maybe they do like an interview with someone, but they start talking about other films they've worked on previously and not the one that you're actually watching. It gets a bit boring to me. But with this one, it was more short and to the point, so it was good in that sense. Just to quickly tell you what there is on here, there's a filmmaker's commentary, a behind the scenes featurette, trailers and optional Spanish subtitles, so you can tell it's a Region 1 release from the Spanish subtitles. But like I said, they were quite good from what I can recall. I don't remember too much about them now, but they were short and sweet, no rambling, so pretty good for the extras, just how I like them. So there we go then, 5 out of 10. Unfortunately, it would have just a bit lower than I would have thought. It would have been maybe a 7 or 8, like I said, but it's let down by the bad lighting, but certainly one worth checking out. Alright, thanks for watching, bye.